Good morning and welcome to this presentation for the brave at 8:30 in the morning. We will have a session today entitled The School in Italy, Inequalities, Social Mobility and Territorial Realities. We will have a collection of 4 interesting papers, so each of them will have about 30 minutes to be discussed. The authors will have each 20 minutes, and then we have like 10 minutes after each presentation for questions and debate and so on. And we will start with the first presentation, the problem of teachers' turnover in Italian schools, only a nuisance, yes, or a threat for students' achievement. This is a paper presented by Giovanni Abbiati, Gianluca Argentin, and Tiziano Gerosa. Here with us only Giovanni today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He's a researcher at the Rodolfo Debenedetti Foundation, and his research interests are public policy evaluation and educational inequality. So I give the floor to him.
Thank you, Magdalena. So, our paper, or at least the idea of our investigation, is the use of linked teacher-student data provided by INVALSI to study the distribution of teacher turnover in Italian schools and its effect on achievement. And we started this investigation because what is commonly referred to in journalistic jargon as a supplentite is becoming a major problem in Italian schools, but it's very difficult to study, also because there is a lack of integration of teacher data and student data in Italy on the part of the Ministry of Education. Luckily, INVALSI started some years ago a very interesting survey on the language and mathematics teachers of sample classes, and so we are able at least to use the powerful tools provided by INVALSI to investigate this phenomenon. As everybody knows, teacher turnover is becoming an increasingly relevant phenomenon, and it has negative side effects on both schools administration, teachers, and it is a main source of instability for students and families. One thing that we want to know about this phenomenon as social scientists is, first, what is its size, how it is distributed across schools and different types of students, and whether it has an effect on achievement, also to better to inform in the future policies to contrast this phenomenon. While it is pretty straightforward to imagine why it is harmful on achievement, maybe to the eyes of somebody who is not in the field is less clear why we should worry about its distribution across schools. For distribution across schools, I mean the relative frequency with which students from different social backgrounds have the chance of having unstable teachers. To take the words of Roberto's presentations of yesterday, and to be more explicit, what we are referring to is we are worried about the existence of an implicit segregation in Italian schools, even if the Italian school system is formally highly centralized, also not to incur in relevant segregation phenomena that can nonetheless arise, as the literature seems to suggest. There is an ample evidence about the fact that schools are different from one another, and you can see it by looking at the between school variance in test scores. You can see it in looking at the distribution of students from different social backgrounds across schools, and also researchers as saw how there are highly attractive and highly repulsive schools in teachers' eyes. And this is something that is widely documented in the US context, and also recently in Italy, thanks to the availability of the INVALSI data. We hypothesize, or better said, we expect that the phenomenon of instability of teachers is more concentrated on the works of students, and we draw this from the literature. While we have unclear expectations on the fact whether there is a cumulative disadvantage, meaning that more unstable teachers, so not just one maybe of mathematics or language, but both teachers are teaching the same students. And we can hypothesize that either, given the fact that we also observe intra-school segregation, there is a reinforcement at the school level of this problem, where principals more or less consciously create the type A classes and the type B classes, or we can hypothesize on the other hand, and we have good reason to do it, that the school communities enact compensatory mechanisms within the school not to create, so to speak, ghetto classes. As concerns the effects, that is the impact that instability has on achievement, we imagine that given the importance of the relationship between students and teachers and of the continuity of this relationship and the time that is necessary to build and maintain such a relationship, we expect this, this phenomenon to negatively impact achievement, and we expect that it is more harmful for works of students. I would skip the part about the context because we have still much work to do. And here is what we see in a nutshell. We will use the INVALSI data linked between students and teachers from the academic year 2017-2018 on grade 8. We use grade 8 because there is, it has two characteristics that are we can exploit for the analysis. First is that the same language and mathematics teacher should be ideally the same throughout all lower secondary course, and also we have the possibility to control for the entrance competences of students into lower secondary, given the fact that students were assessed in grade 5. Our results say basically that instability, contrary to our expectation, hits similarly students and territories all across the country, and students from different social backgrounds. This is reassuring on the one hand. On the other, the other implication is that you cannot escape the faults of the Italian school system. Whether you are rich or poor, you're hit in the same way. We observe a little inequality, but less than we would have expected, or at least as compared with other phenomena. What we see is that instability, though, is more likely to harm the achievement of students from low socioeconomic background. So when it rains, it pours, basically. And I already described the data. I would like to focus on the fact that INVALSI data provide a much wider sample to compare to international surveys, so we can rely on about 20,000 students. There 2,000 teachers of language and mathematics and about 1,000 classes. One of the problem of INVALSI data, but it's not INVALSI's fault, is that we would like to have all the school community, while we can rely only on language and mathematics teachers and only from the 2 sample classes that were drawn in each school. So my hope for the future is that for a future integration of data sources, or given that we have Roberto here, I would push strongly INVALSI to test also all other subjects and to make a much wider to make a much wider sample. So we took 2 questions in the teacher questionnaire to derive a typology of instability. So we took the question about how many years are you teaching in this school, and how many years you are teaching in this class. So we came with this typology. There are teachers that are unstable in the class, that is, they came to in the second or in the third year, and are unrooted in the school, that is, they freshly arrived and they took a class that already started the lower secondary course. They could be unstable in the class, but rooted in the school, that is, for organizational reasons, they were shifted from a class to another, or they can be stable and rooted. The INVALSI data say that this last typology, that is the one that we would like for our kids, is the more widespread, about 65% in the national sample. But we also have to consider that maybe instability is underestimated because there is a little but non-negligible attrition in this data, and we suspect that unstable teachers are also those that do not fill in the questionnaire. Now, just to give you some taste of our analysis, we try to draw a profile of unstable teachers, and what we see, coming back to our typology, is that the first category, those that are unstable and unrooted, are those that are younger and are those that have a precarious contract, while the opposite can be said for those that are stable and rooted. But attention that it's not that all unstable teachers are precarious, but it is true that most precarious are unstable teachers. While it is difficult to draw a characterization for the second type, it is probably an idiosyncratic solution that every school finds, and we were not able to really find some distinctive trait. It's interesting that this distribution across the country and type of school as defined by previous average school scores seem to be more or less the same. Not exactly the same, but more or less the same. So we cannot say so far that there is a particular concentration of this type of teachers in particular schools. Another question for the distributional analysis is that we are interested on who's teaching whom. So who are the students more likely to have unstable teachers? We try to look at different variables that can depict different situations for the teachers, or as, so to speak, the desirability of having a certain type of students, at least according to literature. So we try to see the proportion of natives within each class, the proportion of students with no parents with a diploma, which is a proxy for socioeconomic background. Another nice proxy of socioeconomic background comes from the student questionnaire. It is the number of books at home, which is a very, very good predictor of achievement. And also, we looked at the INVALSI score at grade 5. And basically, what we see is always the same story. There is a little bit of inequality, that is, the more the students come from disadvantaged socioeconomic background, the more likely they are to have an unstable teacher, but this relationship is not strong. It is about 2-3 percentage points of difference between those that are stable and rooted and those that are unstable and unrooted. So here you see some graphs, so you can notice that there is a difference, but this difference is not that strong. And so we can conclude that there is an association between the two phenomena, but it is not that strong. As concerns the cumulative disadvantages, here there is a typology of classes. What we see is that we don't find an accumulation of disadvantage. Much of the classes, about the 50%, have one unstable teachers and one stable teachers. So apparently the two phenomena that I described before balance one another out. Now I have 5 minutes, so I will skip some details. We also try to measure the effects of instability on achievement. There is a methodological challenge here because we are trying to isolate a causal link between teachers' continuity and student performance in a world that is not controlled by the researcher. So we have to find some methods that allow us to extract a spurious component from our correlation. We did it by using student fixed effect models. That is, we look within the same student whether a difference in the achievement of mathematics and language can be explained by the variation in their teachers. So we exploit the fact that we have for each student scores in mathematics and characteristics of the teacher, scores in language and characteristics of the teacher. So we concentrate for the characteristics of the model clearly on those classes where there is a shift in the characteristics of the teacher on the variable that we are observing, and in the models that we use, our outcome is the test scores at grade 8 and the X is the stability in the classroom. Now let's go rapidly to this is how the model looks like, and I will concentrate on the coefficients for instability. They are expressed in standard deviations. So if we remember from yesterday, one standard deviation is about 1 year of schooling, and what the model on the whole sample says is that being unstable and unrooted being the reference category, if you have an unstable but rooted teacher, that matters not that much with the reference category, while the real difference is made for those that are stable and rooted. It's about 0.4, 0.7 standard deviations. We splitted our sample by books at home, and we chose as thresholds those that were associated with a jump in the difference in achievement, and we saw that there is an interesting something interesting going on. That is that for those that have more than 100 books at home, which is a proxy of a family that has relevant cultural resources, having an unstable teacher doesn't matter that much. So while the effect is stronger as the number of books in the home decreases. So this basically says that there is accumulation of disadvantage for the students that cannot enact, whose families cannot enact compensatory mechanism to cope with teachers' instability, and basically what we can say the faults of the system. Here we are trying to work on the context, which is more difficult, but what we started to do is that we split the sample by area, also because we know that there are relevant differences in the country, and we see that much of this negative effect, if you look at the coefficients, is due to the southern areas, especially models where we control for previous achievement. It could, before drawing conclusions, we have to be very cautious, because it could well be a simple composition effect. That is, the less the families with cultural resources in the south, that could explain the results that we got at the macro level. So we split it again, the analysis by books at home and area. We are asking a lot to our models because they are pretty demanding in terms of computation, and we need ample samples. But what we see is basically that being in a family that can enact compensatory mechanisms seem to be more or less the same in the north, in the center, in the south. We are not that sure, because if you look for the southern area, the last rows, models 1 and model 3, there seems to be something going on, but we have to we are making additional analysis, because if you look When we control for previous achievement, we are losing proportionally much more cases in the south than we do in the north, where the matching, the longitudinal matching has been more successful. So before concluding anything about this relationship, we have to make additional analysis, and this is part of the future work. So understanding what is going on in the south, because before giving presenting this as evidence that we have to act more in some contexts and less in other, but the finding that the higher your sociocultural level, the lower the negative effect that you can have, seem to be pretty strong. So, concluding, this is not a phenomenon that is highly socially patterned in the distribution, but it is socially patterned in the effects. And this is our starting point for our future analysis. So I'm running out of time, so thank you.